I caught my wife cheating, so I set a trap for her. Now her life is in shambles, and I feel no remorse. My name's Alexander, and I'm 32 years old. I never thought I would find myself in this situation. My life was going well, at least I thought so. I had a stable job, a beautiful home, and, most importantly, I had my wife, Emily. We had been married for 5 years, and I believed our love was strong. But one day, everything changed. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I came home from work early, excited to surprise Emily. As I entered our house, the smell of her favorite dish filled the air, and I felt a sense of warmth. But when I walked into the living room, something felt off. Emily was on the couch, her phone in her hand, but she quickly hid it when she saw me. A red flag shot up in my mind. I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination. We sat down for dinner, but I could tell she was distracted. She kept checking her phone, and our conversations felt forced. That night, while she took a shower, I glanced at her phone and my heart sank. I saw messages that turned my world upside down. "Can't wait to see you again," one message read. Another said, "I miss you so much." My stomach twisted in knots. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Emily was cheating on me. My heart shattered into a million pieces, and I felt rage bubbling inside me. How could she do this to us? The next few days were a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I replayed the moments in my head, the laughter, the love we shared, and now it all felt like a lie. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I knew I needed to think carefully. I didn't want to lose my mind in the heat of the moment. Instead, I decided to plan my revenge. I spent hours going over the messages in my mind. I needed evidence. I started taking notes on her behavior, looking for signs that would confirm my suspicions. She was becoming more secretive, often leaving the house to run errands for longer than usual. Each time she left, I felt a wave of anger washing over me. One evening, as she went out, I felt a rush of determination. I would catch her in the act. I wanted her to feel the same pain she had caused me. I thought about all the love I had given her, and now, all I could think about was revenge. It was time to set my plan in motion. As the days went by, I became obsessed with my plan. I needed to act casual around Emily, like nothing was wrong. This would make it easier to catch her off guard. I started playing the role of the perfect husband while secretly gathering information. Every smile I gave her felt like a mask hiding my true feelings. I began to follow her, using the excuse of needing to run errands myself. I took mental notes of where she went and who she met. Each time I saw her with that other man, my heart burned with anger. I couldn't let her get away with this. I started to think of ways to make her face the truth. One night, while she was asleep, I decided to dig deeper into her phone. I found a hidden app that allowed her to chat with him without me knowing. I felt a mix of sadness and anger as I read their conversations. They talked about meeting in secret, about how much fun they had together. It was like a dagger to my heart. I couldn't believe she could be so cruel. Then, I had an idea. I would create a fake event, something she wouldn't want to miss. I'd tell her I was going away for the weekend, leaving her free to meet him without suspicion. I crafted a story about a work conference in another city, making it sound important. She seemed excited, thinking I'd be gone. Little did she know, I planned to stay nearby and watch her every move. I arranged everything, booked a hotel room close to her favorite spots, and kept my phone charged to record any proof I could gather. I felt a rush of adrenaline as the day approached. I was finally going to expose her. And I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she realized I had caught her red-handed. When the weekend arrived, I drove to the hotel, my heart racing. I checked into my room, trying to calm my nerves. I knew this was my chance. I waited for Emily to leave the house before I headed out. I followed her to a cafe where she often met her lover. As I approached the cafe, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. I parked my car a short distance away and watched her walk in, holding hands with another man. My heart raced and I felt a wave of anger wash over me. I quickly set up my phone to record the moment. They laughed, whispered sweet nothings, and kissed. I felt like I was going to explode. This was the proof I needed. As I recorded their interactions, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Emily thought she was clever, but I had outsmarted her. I couldn't wait to confront her with this evidence and watch her world crumble. I had set my trap, and now I was ready to spring it. A few days later, after gathering all the evidence, I felt both nervous and excited. I was ready to confront Emily. I knew this would be a pivotal moment in our lives, and I wanted to make sure she understood the gravity of her actions. The thought of finally confronting her gave me both dread and exhilaration. That evening, I asked Emily to sit down with me. She had no idea what was coming. I could see her smiling, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. I felt a rush of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a strange sense of power. I had spent so many sleepless nights thinking about this moment. "Emily, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady. She looked at me, her smile fading slightly. "I know what you've been doing." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Her expression changed instantly from surprise to denial. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaking. But I wasn't going to let her dismiss this. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. The sound of their laughter filled the room, and I watched as her face turned pale. "Who is he, Emily?" I demanded, my anger boiling over. "How could you betray me like this?" She stammered, trying to come up with excuses, but I wasn't interested in her lies anymore. I wanted the truth. "I swear it's not what it looks like," she pleaded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I made a mistake, Alexander. Please, let's talk about this." But I was done talking. The hurt I felt had transformed into a fierce determination to make her feel the pain I had endured. "How could you say that? You've been lying to me this whole time," I shouted, my heart racing. The fight escalated, with accusations flying back and forth. She blamed me for not being attentive, claiming I had pushed her into someone else's arms. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every word she said made my blood boil. I had given her everything, and now she was trying to turn the blame on me? I felt the anger surge through me, and I knew I had to show her that I was not the weak man she thought I was. In the heat of the moment, I reminded her of all the sacrifices I had made for our relationship, how hard I had worked to build a life for us. "You threw it all away for a fling," I shouted, and the pain in my voice was evident. The argument reached a breaking point. Emily screamed that she couldn't believe I was doing this to her, that I was ruining her life. I stood my ground, feeling the weight of my decisions. I had to make her understand the consequences of her actions. As our fight escalated, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I was finally making her see how wrong she was. But it was also heartbreaking to see the woman I loved fall apart right in front of me. In that moment, I realized that I was no longer the loving husband. I had become the man who sought revenge. The days that followed our confrontation were filled with chaos. Emily was devastated. She had lost the one person she thought would always be there for her. I watched from the sidelines as her life began to crumble. Friends who once adored her slowly drifted away, unable to face the scandal she had caused. Those who did reach out to her were often met with her desperate attempts to explain, but they didn't want to hear it. They had their own lives to worry about, and they didn't want to be associated with someone who had betrayed their spouse. At family gatherings, whispers filled the air whenever Emily walked in. They were polite on the outside, but I could see the judgment in their eyes. I relished every moment of her suffering. It felt like justice was being served. I had a front row seat to the fallout of her actions, and I couldn't help but feel satisfied. It was painful to see her like this, but part of me thought she deserved it. She had broken our vows, shattered the trust we had built, and now she was paying the price. The arguments continued, each one more explosive than the last. She tried to pull me back into the drama, insisting that I was the reason for her downfall. But I remained detached, refusing to let her guilt trips work on me. Every time I saw her cry, a part of me felt guilty. I reminded myself that this was her choice, and she had to live with the consequences. I would often come home to find her sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. I wanted to shake her and tell her to get a grip, but instead, I let her stew in her own misery. One afternoon, I received a call from one of her old friends, Laura. She was concerned about Emily and wanted to talk. I feigned interest, playing the supportive husband while secretly enjoying the drama unfolding. "She just needs some time to heal," I told Laura, sounding genuine. "But I think she's really struggling. As I hung up the phone, I thought about how Emily had lost everyone who once cared about her. I knew she would eventually reach out for help, but she was too proud to admit her mistakes. I began to notice that she was losing her spark. The vibrant, happy woman I had married was fading away, replaced by a shell of her former self. Her work life was also beginning to unravel. She had always been a dedicated employee, but the pressure of her personal life was affecting her performance. Her boss pulled her aside one day, warning her about the rumors circulating in the office. I felt a thrill of satisfaction, knowing that my plan was working. Emily was spiraling, and I couldn't look away. When she came home that evening, she was furious. "I can't believe people are talking behind my back," she yelled, slamming the door. I pretended to be concerned, asking her what happened. Deep down, I felt a sense of triumph. She was getting a taste of the consequences of her actions, and I was reveling in it. As the weeks went on, the tension between us continued to grow. Emily would often lash out at me, blaming me for her situation. But I knew that she was the one who had created this mess. I started thinking about how to take things a step further. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her decisions. I began to sabotage her efforts to find new friends and support. Whenever she would mention someone who had reached out to her, I would subtly discourage her. "Do you really think they care about you?" I'd ask. "They probably just want to gossip." It was cruel, but I felt justified. I wanted her to see the reality of her choices. With each passing day, I watched her become more isolated. She stopped going out, stopped reaching out to people. It was as if she was trapped in her own prison. I realized that I had created a monster, one that was destroying itself, and I felt no remorse. Emily's descent into isolation only deepened. The more she withdrew, the more I felt my plan was working perfectly. It was as if I was watching a slow-motion train wreck, and I couldn't look away. She no longer cared about her appearance or her job. Instead, she spent her days in sweatpants, often skipping meals. I could see the weight falling off her frame, and with each day that passed, I felt a sense of power. Her work performance was slipping fast. I could tell she was terrified of losing her job, but she didn't know how to fix things. One evening, I overheard her talking to a friend on the phone, asking for help. My heart raced with excitement. I decided that now was the perfect time to strike. The next day, I made an anonymous call to her boss, sharing details of her recent behavior. I told him that she had been coming to work late, distracted, and unprofessional. I could hear the worry in his voice as he promised to look into it. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction knowing that I was pushing her further down the rabbit hole. When Emily found out that her boss had called her in for a meeting, she panicked. "I can't afford to lose my job, Alexander," she cried, pacing the living room. I acted concerned, but inside, I was thrilled. "Maybe if you worked a little harder, you wouldn't be in this situation," I replied coolly. The meeting went poorly. Emily returned home in tears, telling me that her boss had given her a final warning. The weight of her failure pressed down on her, and I felt a surge of triumph. "You need to get it together," I said, feigning concern. "Maybe take a break and clear your head." But instead of helping her, I encouraged her to isolate herself even more. I planted seeds of doubt in her mind, telling her that her coworkers were gossiping about her behind her back. It worked perfectly. She stopped interacting with everyone, retreating deeper into her own despair. As the days turned into weeks, I started noticing changes in her behavior. Emily began to rely on alcohol to cope with her pain. She would buy bottles of wine after work, drinking alone in our darkened living room. Each time I saw her pour another glass, I felt a mixture of horror and satisfaction. I was witnessing her self-destruction, and I felt no remorse. She began to lose interest in everything. The woman who once filled our home with laughter was now a shadow of her former self. I often found her slumped on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. I could feel a pang of guilt creeping in, but I quickly pushed it away. This was her doing, not mine. Emily's friends stopped calling, and I knew she was becoming more desperate. One night, she came home with a look of desperation in her eyes. "I need help, Alex. I can't keep living like this," she pleaded. Instead of comforting her, I coldly told her that she should have thought about this before cheating on me. Her face fell, and I could see the realization hit her. It was hard to watch her suffer, but a part of me felt powerful. I had taken control of my life, and she was now the one begging for help. I was no longer the victim. I had become the master of my own fate, and it felt intoxicating. As Emily spiraled deeper into her self-destructive habits, I knew that the end was near. She was losing everything she once held dear, and I was ready to watch it all crumble. I was determined to see this through to the bitter end. The moment I had been anticipating finally arrived. One fateful evening, Emily came home looking utterly defeated. She had just received the news that she had been fired from her job. Her boss had cited her behavior as the reason, and I could see that she was completely shattered. This was the breaking point, and I could hardly contain my excitement. "Emily, I'm so sorry," I said, feigning concern as I watched her break down. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. I felt a rush of satisfaction. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Her total collapse. All the manipulation, all the pain I had witnessed had finally led to this. "Everything is falling apart," she wailed. "I have nothing left." I sat next to her, maintaining my facade. "You need to pull yourself together," I said softly, pretending to comfort her. "Maybe you should take a break. Find yourself again." In the days that followed, Emily tried to find another job, but her confidence was completely shattered. Each rejection email or failed interview sent her spiraling further into despair. She stopped showering, stopped caring about her appearance, and it was heartbreaking to witness. But again, I felt that familiar thrill. I was finally seeing the consequences of her actions come to fruition. One day, as I came home from work, I found her sitting on the floor, surrounded by empty wine bottles. She looked up at me with bloodshot eyes and a vacant expression. "I can't do this anymore, Alexander," she said. "I don't know how to fix this." I played the concerned husband, but inside I was ecstatic. She was becoming completely dependent on alcohol, and I felt powerful watching her fall apart. "Maybe you should talk to someone," I suggested. "A therapist could help." In my mind, I was already planning to sabotage her attempts to seek help. I knew she wouldn't follow through. She was too lost in her own misery. When she finally mustered the courage to call a therapist, I made sure to interfere. I would casually mention how expensive therapy was, and how it wouldn't help. "You just need to give it time, Em," I'd say. "Therapy is a waste of money." And each time, I could see her resolve weaken. Eventually, she stopped trying to seek help altogether. She became a shell of the woman I once loved. I watched as her world crumbled, and it felt surreal. The once confident and vibrant Emily was now a broken woman who had lost everything. I had orchestrated her downfall, and I was the puppet master pulling the strings. As time went on, I started to notice a change in her behavior. She began to hang out with people from the wrong crowd. I could see her slipping further and further away from the person she once was. It was terrifying, yet exhilarating. I knew I had won this battle. Then one night, after a particularly intense day of drinking, Emily came home late. I could smell the alcohol on her breath from a distance. "I can't take this anymore, Alex," she slurred, tears streaming down her face. "I've lost everything." I feigned sympathy, but inside I was filled with a sick sense of satisfaction. "Maybe you should take a break and figure things out," I suggested. "You don't need to rush into anything." Little did she know I had no intention of helping her. I wanted to watch her suffer, to witness the consequences of her choices. That night marked a turning point. I could see Emily spiraling deeper into despair, and as she sunk lower, I felt stronger. I was no longer a victim. I had taken back my power. I had succeeded in my revenge, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Emily's life was about to change forever, and I was determined to see it through to the end. It was a cold morning when I first saw her sitting on the street corner. I had been on my way to work, and there she was, Emily, wrapped in an old tattered blanket, her hair matted and unkempt. I had expected it to happen eventually, but seeing her there in person struck a chord I hadn't anticipated. I felt a rush of satisfaction flood through me. The street was bustling with people rushing to work, completely ignoring her existence. I watched as she clutched a small cup in her hands, begging for change. It was hard to reconcile the image of the woman who had once been my wife with the fragile figure sitting on the pavement. I had seen her deteriorate over the last few months, but this was a new low. As I continued to walk, a part of me wanted to stop and say something. But another part, the stronger part, told me to keep going. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. I thought about how she had treated me during our marriage, how she had betrayed me without a second thought. This was her punishment, and I was reveling in it. I would occasionally drive by her spot on my way to work, and each time I did, it brought me a twisted sense of joy. I'd see her interacting with other homeless people, sharing stories and laughter, but there was always an emptiness in her eyes. I knew she had lost everything, her friends, her family, her dignity. But what I hadn't expected was how quickly her situation worsened. I overheard people talking about her during lunch breaks at work. They whispered about the woman who had lost her job and her home, the one who had been so vibrant before. I smiled to myself, knowing that they were talking about my wife. Weeks passed, and Emily's appearance grew worse. I noticed her skin becoming pale, and her eyes dull. She began to wear the same clothes every day, and the smell that wafted from her made it clear that she was no longer taking care of herself. I felt no pity. Instead, I felt a strange sense of accomplishment. One day, I decided to stop and buy her some food. I thought it would be a good way to taunt her, to show her how far she had fallen. I approached her, holding a bag of sandwiches. "Hey, Emily," I said, trying to sound casual. Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment I could see a flicker of hope. "Alex?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" I handed her the bag and smiled. "Just thought you might be hungry. How's life treating you?" I reveled in her discomfort as she opened the bag, her fingers trembling. It's hard," she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. I could feel a pang of something deep inside me, but I quickly pushed it aside. "You made your choices," I said coldly. "You're the one who decided to cheat and ruin everything. Now look where you are." I watched as the light faded from her eyes, replaced by a look of utter defeat. "Please, Alex," she begged. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But I wasn't interested in her pleas. I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there, clutching the bag of sandwiches. The satisfaction I felt was overwhelming. It wasn't long before Emily's situation worsened even further. I continued to see her on the street, but now she was no longer the woman I had known. She had transformed into a shadow, consumed by her pain and despair. I began to hear whispers of her turning to drugs, using them to numb the suffering that had become her reality. One evening, I saw her sitting in a back alley, surrounded by a group of disheveled people. They were sharing needles and passing around small bags filled with powder. My heart raced as I realized she had fallen into a world that I had never imagined for her. A part of me felt sick, but I buried that feeling deep down. This was her choice, and she had to face the music. I walked closer, hidden from view, and listened as she laughed and cried with her new friends. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The vibrant woman who once filled our home with laughter was now reduced to this. I felt a mixture of emotions: disgust, satisfaction, and a strange sense of vindication. It was shocking to watch her life spiral out of control. I heard stories from people who used to know her. They said she had changed, that she was no longer the same person. They whispered about her erratic behavior, how she would go days without eating or sleeping. I took it all in, relishing the chaos she had brought upon herself. One day, I ran into Laura again, Emily's old friend. She was in tears, asking if I had seen Emily. "She's really struggling, Alex. I don't know what to do," she said, looking for answers. I feigned concern, but inside I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. "She made her bed," I replied coolly. "Now she has to lie in it." As the months went by, I learned that Emily had lost the few remaining connections she had left. She was completely alone, living on the streets, and I was the one watching her fall. Every time I saw her, I felt a sense of power. She had destroyed my life, and now I was watching her destroy hers. The last time I saw her, she was sitting on the ground, eyes glazed over, mumbling to herself. I could see the marks on her arms from where she had injected herself. It was a stark reminder of how far she had fallen. I approached her, standing a few feet away, and she looked up, barely recognizing me. "Alex," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Help me." But I felt no compassion. Instead, I felt a sense of justice. "You did this to yourself," I said coldly. "I'm not your savior." As I walked away, I could hear her sobbing behind me. I felt a twinge of something, but I brushed it aside. This was the end of the road for her. She had made her choices, and now she was paying the price. I went home that night, feeling empowered. I had turned the tables, had taken control of my own destiny. Emily was now a ghost of her former self, and I felt no remorse. I had won, and it felt good. I had set the trap, and she had fallen into it, just as I had planned. As I lay in bed, I thought about everything that had happened. I had turned my pain into strength, and Emily was now living with the consequences of her betrayal. I closed my eyes, satisfied with the knowledge that she was gone from my life forever. The chapter was closed, and I was free. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next video. See you next time.